The sound of her heels echoed through the house as she walked toward the door. "Honey, Dave's already here," she said casually, throwing her coat over her shoulder. "Let's go. I'll introduce you to him." The words hit like a punch in the gut. Dave? The same guy she had mentioned in passing a few weeks ago, the one I had always suspected? My mind raced, adrenaline surging through my veins as I forced myself to stay calm. I could barely process what she'd said, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a casual goodbye. There was no way I was going to let this go unnoticed. "If he comes within a foot of this house, I'll make sure he regrets it," I said, my voice barely controlled. "And you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Her eyes met mine with an expression of cold indifference, like she had heard this all before and couldn't care less. "You think you're in control here? You're pathetic," she replied with a smirk, her voice dripping with disdain. My chest tightened as I felt my anger surge, but she was already out the door, her high heels clicking against the floor, a final echo of the betrayal I could feel crawling up my spine. I stood there, motionless, as the door slammed shut behind her. It was all so sudden, so calm from her end, but I knew deep down everything had changed. I had always known something was off. The late nights, the strange excuses, the way she always avoided eye contact when I brought up anything even remotely personal. But I never expected it to be this blatant. This in my face. My fingers clenched into fists as I paced the living room. She was gone, out the door with him just like that. I couldn't believe it. Had I really not seen the signs sooner? The trust one had given her, the loyalty, all shattered in a matter of seconds. There was no more pretending. I couldn't stay here, not while my mind was racing through 1,000 different scenarios. I needed answers. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. As I grabbed my jacket and stormed out of the house, the last thing I heard was the sound of her laughing. It stung like salt on a wound, and I couldn't understand why she didn't even try to hide it. My feet moved faster than my thoughts as I got in the car. I didn't know where they were going, but I was determined to find out. I had to. I had to know just how deep this went. As I drove, my mind raced. What was going through her head? Was she really so confident that I wouldn't find out? Or was this all part of a bigger game? One where I was the fool? I tried to shake off the anger, but it kept bubbling up inside me. I could see her face every time I closed my eyes, her smug smile, as if she had won some twisted victory. But I wasn't going to let it end like this. I couldn't just sit back and let her walk all over me. The streets blurred as I sped through town, my hands gripping the wheel tighter with each passing second. Where could they be? I tried to calm myself, but I couldn't help but think of all the possibilities. She had already been so brazen about everything, but what was really going on with her and Dave? Had they been seeing each other longer than I thought? I had to know. As I turned onto the road, I spotted the sleek black sports car parked outside a small cafe, exactly where I suspected they might be. It was his car. I could feel the pit in my stomach grow bigger as I parked a few cars down the street, trying to remain unnoticed. I sat there for a moment, staring at the car, gathering my thoughts. What would I say when I saw them together? Would I just walk in, confront her, or try to gather more evidence? The idea of confronting her now, in front of him, made my skin crawl, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out. I stepped out of the car, my breath shallow as I approached the cafe. It was quiet outside, save for the hum of the city in the distance. My footsteps felt deafening, and I wondered if anyone could hear the thunderous pounding of my heart. I took a deep breath, pushing open the door. Inside, I scanned the room, looking for her, looking for him. And then I saw them. They were sitting at a corner booth, laughing, her hand resting casually on his arm. Dave, the guy she had been seeing behind my back, the guy she had been talking about like he was just some friend. But the way she was looking at him now, it was obvious. My chest tightened, and I froze in place. This wasn't the woman I had been married to for the past 7 years. This was a stranger, a woman who had completely betrayed me without a second thought. As if sensing my presence, Jessica turned toward the door. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She quickly straightened up, and a fake smile stretched across her face. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What? Did you think I was just going to sit around waiting for you all night? I was seething, but I couldn't speak. My throat had gone dry, and the only thing I could focus on was the way Dave was looking at me. Like I was the problem, like I was the one intruding on their time. Jessica, what the hell is going on here? I finally managed to choke out, my voice hoarse with anger and betrayal. She looked me up and down, a smug look crossing her face. What? Are you really going to make a scene here? You don't have a right to be upset. Not anymore. I took a step closer, my voice rising. I have every right to be upset. You've been lying to me, toying with me for God knows how long. And now you're sitting here with him, acting like nothing happened. Dave finally spoke, his voice low and condescending. You need to calm down, man. She doesn't owe you anything anymore. That was it. My blood boiled over. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This guy had the audacity to speak to me like that. Before I could even process what I was doing, I lunged across the table, grabbing Dave by the collar and pulling him to his feet. I could feel the tension in the air, a mixture of anger and confusion. Jessica jumped back, her eyes wide with shock. Don't you dare talk to me like that. I growled, shaking him. You're the one who doesn't belong here. Dave didn't back down. What? You gonna fight me? You think that's gonna fix anything? He shoved me back, but I didn't care. Every part of me wanted to break something, wanted to hurt him the way I was hurting. Jessica stood there, completely unfazed by the scene. She didn't seem to care that I was furious, that everything was falling apart. In fact, I think she liked it. Her smirk grew wider as she glanced between me and Dave. Is this really what you wanted, Chris? She asked, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. To come here and make a fool of yourself? You're pathetic. I stared at her, my chest heaving with anger. But beneath it all, there was something else, something I wasn't willing to admit yet. Pain. The pain of knowing I wasn't enough for her. The pain of realizing that everything I thought I knew about our marriage had been a lie. Dave and Jessica shared a look, and for a moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was like they had rehearsed this, like they were playing some sick game, and I was the punchline. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This was something much bigger, something deeper. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to leave without them. I couldn't breathe. The air in the cafe felt thick with tension as I locked eyes with Jessica. The amusement in her eyes made my stomach churn. She stood there, acting like she was untouchable, like she had everything under control. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held myself back. There was no point in making a scene. This wasn't just about me. It was about the years of lies, the betrayal that had been simmering under the surface for who knows how long. This wasn't just a slip-up. It was a carefully planned act, and I had been blind to it. Enough, I said, my voice low but filled with a simmering anger. Tell me the truth, Jessica. Now, no more games. She just looked at me, that same infuriating smile playing on her lips. I could see the power she felt in that moment, the power of knowing that she had me right where she wanted me. She had been pulling the strings for so long, and I had been too naive to see it. You really want the truth? She said, stepping closer, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. You want to hear what you've been too stupid to realize all this time? I didn't flinch. Yes, I want to know why you've been lying to me. Why you've been sneaking around behind my back with him. I nodded towards Dave, who was now standing behind her, watching with a smug grin on his face. Why didn't you tell me? Were you just waiting for the right moment to rub it in my face? Jessica's eyes narrowed, but there was no apology. There was no guilt. Just cold, calculated detachment. You really think I owe you an explanation? She said, her tone laced with disgust. This marriage has been a joke for years. You think I'm going to keep pretending that everything's fine? That's laughable. I could feel my blood boil at her words. You think I haven't noticed, Jessica? You think I haven't seen the way you've been distant, the way you've been lying about where you were? You think I didn't know about you and Dave? The smirk never left her face. Oh, so you didn't know? Funny, you never said anything before. Maybe that's because you knew deep down that you weren't enough for me. Maybe you were just too scared to admit it. Her words hit like a slap in the face. I wanted to say something, anything, to make her see how much she had hurt me. But the words wouldn't come. She had already won. She had taken everything from me, and I was standing here, powerless, watching as she reveled in it. You've always been too good at pretending, Jessica, I spat. Pretending like everything was fine, pretending like I was enough for you. But you've been out there, living some other life, and I was too blind to see it. She took a step closer, her eyes cold and calculating. I didn't ask for this, Chris. I didn't ask for you to be this boring. She threw the word at me like it was something vile. You stopped trying. You stopped caring. And you were never there when I needed you. I felt a sharp pain in my chest at her words, but I refused to let her see me break. You think that justifies what you've done? What you've been doing behind my back? Jessica shrugged, the coldness in her eyes never wavering. What's the point of justifying it? It's done. It's over. I don't owe you anything. I never did. Her words stung. They were meant to hurt, and they did. But there was something else now. Something colder. The realization that I wasn't the victim here anymore. She had taken that from me, too. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about how she had twisted everything, manipulated the situation until I had no ground to stand on. I could feel the anger building inside me again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just about rage. It was about something deeper, something final. I'm done, Jessica, I said, my voice steady, though every fiber of my being wanted to shout. I'm done being your fool. I'm done with the lies and the games. But you've already made your choice. You've already shown me who you really are. Her expression shifted slightly. For the first time in this entire conversation, I saw a flicker of something. But it wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was relief. Relief that she was finally free. Dave stepped in then, his voice smooth, almost like he was talking to a child. Listen, man, you need to understand something. She's moved on. You should too. There's nothing left here for you. It was like a switch flipped inside me. Something inside me snapped, and I couldn't hold it back any longer. Without thinking, I took a step forward, grabbing Dave by the collar again and pulling him toward me. You think you can just walk into my life and take what's mine? I growled, my voice low and dangerous. Dave didn't flinch. You can't fight what's already over. With a growl, I shoved him back, and this time I didn't stop. It wasn't about proving anything to him. It wasn't even about getting revenge. It was about something deeper, something raw that had been building for so long that it finally erupted. I turned back to Jessica, my gaze hardening. I don't care what you think you've done. This marriage is over, and I won't be your backup plan anymore. Her lips curled into another smile. I don't need you, Chris. I never did. Maybe it's time you realized that. The words hit harder than any punch. But I didn't back down. Not anymore. It felt like the entire room was closing in on me as I stood there, staring at Jessica. The smug expression on her face was like a slap in the face. Every word she spoke a reminder of how far she had fallen. My hands were shaking, but not out of fear. No, this wasn't fear. It was something else. Something deeper. I had been with this woman for years, trusting her, loving her, believing in the vows we had made. And now, everything was crashing down in front of me. Dave was still standing there, looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. His casual stance only made me angrier. He was acting like I was the intruder in this situation, like I didn't have the right to feel betrayed. Jessica, on the other hand, seemed perfectly calm, almost too calm. She wasn't even fazed by what had just happened, by the confrontation that had gone from bad to worse in a matter of seconds. Instead, she seemed almost relieved, as if she had been waiting for this moment for so long. For a second, I almost felt like I was the one who had been living in a fantasy world all this time, blindly accepting her lies and pretending like everything was fine. But now the truth was staring me in the face, raw and ugly. She had been living this double life, and I had been too naive to see it. I don't understand, Jessica, I said, my voice breaking through the tension in the room. How could you do this? How could you throw everything away for him? For someone like him? Jessica tilted her head, her eyes flashing with something cold and calculating. For someone like him? You really don't get it, do you? You've been so focused on your life that you never once bothered to ask about mine. My chest tightened, the frustration and pain threatening to choke me. What about us? What about everything we built? What happened to the woman I married? She rolled her eyes, letting out a sharp laugh. The woman you married? That woman was a shadow. I've been stuck in this dead-end marriage with you for so long, pretending like I still cared. I didn't care, Chris. I haven't for a long time. Her words felt like a knife to the chest. I had always known something was wrong, but hearing her say it out loud, hearing her confirm that everything I had believed in was a lie, it was more than I could handle. I gave you everything, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I was there for you, through everything. And this is how you repay me? With him. Jessica's eyes softened, just for a moment, but it was a false softness. You were never enough for me, Chris. Not physically, not emotionally. I wanted something more. I wanted passion, excitement, something real. She paused, letting the words settle between us. And Dave gave me that. Something you couldn't. Something I've been missing for years. Every word she spoke made me feel smaller, more insignificant. I had always tried my best, always been there when she needed me, but none of that mattered. She didn't care. She wanted something more, something I couldn't give her. Dave, who had been silent for a while, spoke up again, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. You don't get it, man. She's moved on. She's done with you. She's finally free of the boring routine you had her trapped in. I could feel my anger rising again. This guy, this arrogant prick, was standing there acting like he had won some sort of victory. But he didn't know anything. He didn't know how much this had destroyed me. He didn't know what it was like to love someone with everything you had, only to have them tear it all down in a matter of moments. I stepped closer to Dave, my fists clenched at my sides. You think you've won? You think you've taken something from me? You haven't taken anything. You've just destroyed what was left of any respect I had for her, for you, for everything. Jessica was watching, but she didn't say anything. She didn't care. She wasn't trying to defend herself or even explain anything. She had made her choice, and she was standing by it, no matter how much it hurt me. It was then that I realized something. This wasn't just about me and Jessica anymore. It was about the lies, the deceit, the manipulation. She had been playing a game, and I had been too blind to see it. I had trusted her with my heart, with my life, and she had betrayed me. I'm done with this, I said finally, my voice cold and resolute. I'm done with you, Jessica, and I'm done with him. I turned to Dave, locking eyes with him. You think this is over? Think again. I'm not just going to walk away from this. You've made your choices, and now I'm going to make mine. Dave laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of confidence. It was a laugh of someone who had underestimated just how much pain he had caused. He didn't see it yet, but he would. Jessica, still standing there, took a deep breath, as if she had been waiting for me to make this decision. You really think you can just walk away from this, Chris? It's too late for that. You've lost. I looked at her, a sense of finality settling over me. No, Jessica, you've lost. You lost me the moment you chose him over everything we had. And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving the cafe behind. My heart was heavy, my mind racing. But there was no turning back now. I had made my decision. I didn't look back. As I stepped out of the cafe and into the cold, night air, I tried to steady my breathing. The weight of everything was beginning to settle on my chest, a suffocating heaviness I hadn't been prepared for. The moment I walked away from Jessica and Dave, I knew there was no turning back. Everything had changed. The drive home was a blur. I barely even remember the roads I was passing. My mind was racing with 100 different thoughts. What now? What was the next step? I was filled with a mixture of rage, hurt, and confusion, but somewhere deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. There would be no simple resolution, no easy answers. I had to face this. I had to find a way to make sense of it all. As I entered the house, the silence was deafening. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The house was eerily quiet, the familiar surroundings now feeling like a prison. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we had built together? I walked into the living room, and my gaze fell on the photos hanging on the walls, the family pictures, the snapshots of vacations, the smiles that now seemed so fake. All of it, a lie. Every single one of those moments was tainted now. The person I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, was nothing more than a stranger. The anger came back in waves, crashing over me like a tidal wave. But beneath that anger, there was something else, something that I wasn't ready to face. It was pain, Raw, unbearable pain. I couldn't believe that after everything, after all the years of commitment, this was how it ended. With lies. With betrayal. I grabbed my phone, staring at it for a few moments before I finally made the call. Hey, Chris. What's up? It was Mark, a close friend of mine from college. He was one of the few people I could always rely on, and right now, I needed someone to talk to. She left me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I found out. It's over. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Mark's voice came back, quiet but steady. I'm sorry, man. What happened? I don't even know where to start, I said, running a hand through my hair. I found out she's been seeing someone else. Dave, the guy she mentioned a few weeks ago. It's like she's been living some double life, and I never even saw it. I feel like such an idiot. You're not an idiot, Chris, Mark said. She's the one who messed up. Don't forget that. I didn't respond right away. What was there to say? The damage had already been done. My heart was still shattered, but I was trying to find the strength to pick up the pieces. You need to come over, Mark said after a moment. You don't have to go through this alone. I'll be there in 20. I agreed, not really thinking about it. I didn't want to be alone, but I also didn't want to face the reality of what had just happened. But I knew Mark would be there for me. At least for now, that was something. As I hung up the phone, I looked around the room again. It felt so different now. So empty. I didn't know what to do with myself. Should I start packing up her things? Should I just leave it all behind and never look back? My mind was swirling with questions I couldn't answer. There was no instruction manual for this. No guidebook for navigating betrayal. I moved toward the bedroom, my feet heavy with each step. The door was ajar, and I pushed it open slowly. The sight that greeted me was almost too much to bear. The bed we had shared, the place where we had slept for years, now felt foreign. Cold, uninviting. I saw her things scattered across the room. The clothes she had left behind, the perfume she always wore, the little trinkets that once held so much meaning. And then I saw it. A small notebook tucked under the pillow. I reached for it hesitantly, but something told me I needed to know what was inside. I opened the notebook and began to read. What I found was worse than anything I had imagined. Page after page, it was filled with notes, scribbled thoughts, and confessions. Everything she had been hiding from me. The most gut-wrenching part was that it wasn't just about her relationship with Dave. It was about everything. Her dissatisfaction, her disappointment, the things I had done wrong without even realizing it. The things I thought were minor, insignificant, turned out to be the cracks that had started to tear us apart. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I had been living in the dark, thinking that everything was fine, but she had been making plans to leave for so long. She had been emotionally checked out for months, maybe even years, and I hadn't even noticed. I dropped the notebook, my hands trembling. I didn't want to know anymore. I couldn't take it. But there it was, the truth, staring me in the face. I closed the door softly and walked back into the living room, my head spinning. This was it. There was no going back now. I sat down on the couch, my hands resting in my lap, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a physical force. The realization that I'd been living a lie for so long felt like an anchor around my neck, dragging me deeper into the pit of confusion and hurt. I thought I knew Jessica. I thought I knew her better than anyone else. But now, everything I thought I understood about her, about us, was slipping away. The quiet of the house was deafening. The silence that followed her departure was like a reminder of how much space she had taken up in my life, and how much of it had been occupied by lies. I looked around the living room once more, my gaze falling on the family photos that had once brought me so much joy. Each one of them felt like a mockery now, a perfect facade that had crumbled beneath the weight of the truth. I had always prided myself on being the kind of person who could handle anything, someone who could take on challenges, who could adapt and find solutions. But this was different. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what to do with myself, with my heart, with the wreckage she had left behind. For the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. And then there was the anger. It wasn't just the anger at Jessica. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was at myself. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let things go on this long without noticing the cracks in the foundation? How did I let this happen? The self-doubt flooded in. I had been so focused on keeping our life together keeping things smooth, that I had ignored the signs. The late nights, the strange excuses, the lack of intimacy. I had made excuses for her, told myself that it was just stress, just life. But it was never just that, was it? It was her. It was us. And now, here I was, dealing with the consequences of my own ignorance. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to get a grip on myself. I needed clarity. I needed to understand why she did this. Was it something I had done? Something I had failed to do? Or had I been nothing more than a pawn in her game? Just another chapter in the story she had already written in her mind? I couldn't think straight. The flood of emotions was overwhelming. Anger, sadness, confusion, guilt, all of it mixing together in a toxic stew that clouded my judgment. How could I have been so wrong about her? How could I have thought that we were building something real, something worth fighting for, when all along she had been planning her escape? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out without thinking. It was Mark, the only friend who had been there for me tonight. "Hey, I'm outside. You good?" I stared at the message for a moment, my fingers hovering over the screen. I didn't know if I was ready to talk to anyone yet, but at the same time, I needed someone. I needed to stop drowning in this sea of thoughts and emotions. I opened the door and stepped outside. Mark was leaning against his car, arms crossed, looking at me with concern in his eyes. "You look like hell, man," he said, his voice low. "You sure you want to do this? Talk about it." I nodded slowly, a tight smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, I don't know what else to do." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't press me. Instead, he opened the door to the car and motioned for me to get in. "Get in, let's drive for a bit. We'll figure this out." I climbed into the passenger seat, still feeling like I was in a daze. Mark didn't push me for details at first. He just drove, letting the sound of the engine and the passing scenery fill the silence. I was grateful for it. I needed time to think, to let the shock wear off, to process the events that had led me here. Finally, after a few miles, Mark spoke. "You're gonna have to talk to her again. You know that, right?" I turned to look at him, my brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "She's made her choice. I don't need to say anything else to her." He sighed, glancing at me before returning his attention to the road. "No, you don't have to, but you will need to talk to her. For your own peace of mind. You've been living with this idea of her, this image of who she is, and you're not going to get closure until you hear it from her directly. Why she did it. Why she chose him over you. You need those answers, man. For yourself." I looked out the window, the weight of his words sinking in. It made sense. I needed those answers, but I also feared what I might hear. What if hearing it all from her mouth just made everything worse? What if I heard the truth, the one thing I didn't want to hear, that it was me, that it was my fault? But at the same time, Mark was right. How could I ever move forward if I didn't know the whole truth? "You're right," I said finally, my voice almost a whisper. "I can't just walk away without knowing." Mark nodded. "Exactly. You'll regret it if you don't." The rest of the ride was quiet. My thoughts were consumed by what Mark had said, and I knew that I had a decision to make. I couldn't just sit here, drowning in my own pain, avoiding the confrontation that I knew was inevitable. When we finally reached the park, Mark parked the car, and we both sat there for a while in silence. There was no rush to speak. I just needed time to process everything. Finally, after a few minutes, Mark turned to me. "Whenever you're ready to face it, we'll figure it out." I nodded, tried to keep my emotions in check. "I'm not ready yet, but soon." Mark didn't say anything else. He knew that this was something I had to face on my own. It had been a couple of days since I last saw Jessica and Dave. I hadn't spoken to her, and honestly, I didn't know if I ever wanted to again. But Mark's words kept echoing in my mind. "You need to get closure." I knew that he was right. I had to hear it from her. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of uncertainty and anger. I didn't feel ready for this. I didn't feel ready to face the woman who had shattered my world, but the need for answers was growing. I needed to hear her side, to understand what had driven her to do this, and more importantly, to hear her admit it. I needed her to own it, to face the consequences of her actions, just like I had to face the aftermath of her betrayal. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, contemplating whether or not to make the call. Part of me wanted to just leave it all behind, to never have to deal with this mess again. But the other part, the part that had loved her, the part that had built a life with her, was urging me to do it. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. The phone rang several times before she picked up, and the sound of her voice on the other end sent a shock through me. "Hello," she said, her tone still as cold and distant as I remembered. There was no warmth, no trace of the affection she had once shown me. Just indifference. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We need to talk." There was a long pause. "What's there to talk about, Chris?" "It's over. I'm with Dave now. You really want to go through this again?" I gritted my teeth. "I want the truth, Jessica. I want to know why. I want to hear it from you. Why did you do this? Why did you destroy everything we had?" Another long pause, and then I heard her sigh. "I didn't destroy anything, Chris. You did. You were never enough for me. You weren't exciting enough. You weren't passionate enough. And Dave gave me everything I was missing." Her words hit like a punch in the gut. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I kept my composure. I had to hear this. I had to know what she had to say. "You think that justifies what you did?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "You think betraying me, lying to me for months, is okay because I wasn't exciting enough for you?" Her laugh was bitter, empty. "You think I didn't try to make it work? I gave you chances. I tried to make it better. But you never understood. You were always too focused on your work, too focused on everything but me. And when I needed someone, when I needed excitement, I turned to Dave. He was there for me. You weren't." It felt like my heart had stopped beating. Her words cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. The anger I had been holding on to for so long was now mixed with something far more painful. Hurt. She had told me that she tried, that she gave me chances. But what did that even mean? What I missed? What I failed to see? "You couldn't just talk to me?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You couldn't just be honest with me?" "No," she replied quickly. "Because I knew you wouldn't listen. You wouldn't understand. You were too caught up in your own life, in your own little world, and I got tired of it. I felt like I was drowning." The weight of her words, the weight of everything she had just confessed, was too much to bear. She had made her choice, and it was clear she had been planning it for a long time. She had already emotionally checked out of our marriage long before I had any idea. But there was one thing I needed to know, one last thing that I couldn't let go of. "Is it over with him now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Are you still seeing him?" Jessica didn't hesitate. "No, we're still together. I'm not going to lie to you, Chris. I'm with him, and I'm happy. I don't think there's anything else to say." My stomach turned. She had been with him for so long, lying to me every day. And now, she was so open about it. It was like she had completely severed all ties with any guilt, any remorse. "Fine," I said, standing up, pacing the room. "I don't need anything more from you. You made your choice. But don't ever call me again. Don't ever try to reach out. This is over. For good." There was a brief silence on the other end before she finally spoke. "Fine. Whatever, Chris. It's done. I'm done with you." And just like that, the call ended. I dropped my phone on the couch and stood there, staring at nothing. It felt like the world had been pulled out from under me. I had finally gotten the answers I needed, but they didn't bring me any sense of relief. Instead, they left me feeling more hollow than before. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't feel sorry. She was just done, and that was it. I sat back down, feeling exhausted, numb. I didn't know what to do next. I had the closure I needed, but I wasn't sure if it was the kind I wanted. I thought about the future, about what my life would look like without Jessica in it. It terrified me. I had always imagined that we would be together forever, that we would grow old together. But now, everything was uncertain, and I had to figure out how to rebuild, how to move forward from this. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I was done being her fool, done being the person she could walk all over. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, and I wasn't going to let her destroy me any longer. The next few days passed in a haze of numbness. I went through the motions of life, waking up, eating, working, but everything felt like I was on autopilot. The reality of what had happened was sinking in slowly, like the tide, rising higher and higher until it was swallowing me whole. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape the images of Jessica with Dave, the betrayal that had stained every memory I had of our time together. I spent hours just sitting in the living room, staring at the walls, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. What had I missed? Where had I failed? And then, when I finally gathered the strength to face the truth, another thought hit me. Did it even matter? She had made her choice. She had moved on, and I had no say in it. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life chasing someone who had already decided I wasn't worth fighting for. I had been living in the shadow of her love for far too long, and it was time to step out of it. I had always believed that love was enough. That loyalty, respect, and trust were the pillars of a relationship. But now it felt like all of that was shattered. It wasn't enough. It hadn't been enough for Jessica, and I had to come to terms with the fact that I couldn't change that. The pain was unbearable, but it wasn't the kind of pain that would last forever. I knew that. Time would heal the wound, but it would never erase the scar. I had to learn to live with that, and I had to learn how to move forward without her. I called Mark again. I didn't want to bother him, but I needed to talk to someone who understood. Someone who wouldn't judge me for my pain. Someone who wouldn't tell me to just get over it. Mark knew me better than anyone. He had seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and he never once turned his back on me. "Hey, Mun, you good?" he asked when I picked up the phone. I paused before answering. "I don't know, Mark. I really don't. It's like everything I thought I knew was a lie. And now I'm just lost." He sighed on the other end. "Look, I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy, because it won't be. But you're going to get through this. You're stronger than you think." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes, trying to push through the pain. "I don't even know who I am anymore," I admitted, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "She was everything to me, Mark. And now she's nothing. It's like I've been living a lie for years. And I don't know what to do with myself." Mark's voice softened. "You'll figure it out, Chris. But you need to stop letting her define who you are. You've got to find yourself again. I know it's hard. I know it feels impossible right now. But you're not the same guy you were when you first met Jessica. You've changed. And that's a good thing. You've grown. You've learned. And now, you need to take those lessons and use them to build yourself back up." I took a deep breath, letting his words settle in. He was right. I had changed. I had become someone who was too willing to give, too willing to sacrifice for a relationship that wasn't built on mutual respect. I had ignored my own needs, my own desires, in the hopes of keeping the peace, of making things work. But it was never enough. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust again," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You will," Mark said firmly. "It might take time, but you will. And this time, when you find someone, you'll know what to look for. You'll know how to protect yourself. But you can't let her destroy your faith and love. She's not worth it." I closed my eyes again, letting his words wash over me. I had to believe that he was right. I had to believe that I could rebuild, that I could trust again. But it felt so far away. It felt like a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb. After we hung up, I found myself pacing around the house again. The silence was suffocating. The emptiness was overwhelming. I had always been a person who thrived on companionship, on connection. And now I had nothing. I knew I needed to get out of the house, to clear my mind. So I grabbed my jacket and headed out for a walk. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to move, to feel something other than the heaviness in my chest. The streets were quiet, and the cold air stung my face as I walked, my breath coming out in sharp clouds. The city was alive around me, but I felt completely alone. I couldn't escape the image of Jessica, of her walking away from me with Dave, of the betrayal that had shattered everything I thought was real. I passed by the park where Mark and I had sat just a few days ago. It felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like a different version of me, the person who was still holding on to something that wasn't meant to be. I kept walking, my mind spinning, until I found myself at the edge of the river. The sound of the water rushing over the rocks was calming, but it didn't bring me the peace I'd hoped for. I leaned against the railing, staring at the water below, lost in my thoughts. I knew I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to the life I thought I had. I had to move forward, even if I didn't know where that road would take me. And then, for the first time in days, a small flicker of hope sparked inside me. Maybe I couldn't change the past, but I could change the future. I could choose to move on. I could choose to find happiness again, to rebuild my life, to find the person I was meant to be. But it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But it was a start. And that was enough. The days that followed felt like a blur. I found myself trapped between the echoes of the past and the uncertainty of the future. There were moments when the pain would surge, overwhelming me like a tidal wave. And then there were moments when I felt like I could almost breathe again, like the weight of betrayal wasn't suffocating me anymore. But those moments were fleeting. I'd taken Mark's advice to heart. I started going out more, not to distract myself, but to remind myself that there was still a world out there, one that didn't revolve around Jessica, around the memories of a love that had burned too bright only to fizzle out. It wasn't easy. Every corner, every street, every place we used to go together felt like a reminder of what I had lost. But with each step, with each day that passed, I began to realize something. I hadn't lost everything. I hadn't lost who I was. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of feeling joy, of feeling love, even if I couldn't see how right now. I started working out again, something I had abandoned during the last few months of my marriage. I needed to take care of myself, to remind myself that I was still strong, still capable of being the person I had always been. I was determined to find myself again, to rebuild the version of me that I had buried beneath the weight of Jessica's betrayal. I also began to reach out to old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years, people who knew me before Jessica and the life I had built with her. It felt good to reconnect, to talk to people who saw me for who I really was, not for the role I played in a marriage that was now a distant memory. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, that it would take time, but I could feel the healing process starting, like a slow but steady drip of water that would eventually carve its way through stone. It wasn't the quick fix I wanted, but it was a start, and that was all I could ask for. One evening, a few weeks after everything had collapsed, I found myself sitting at a bar with a friend I hadn't seen in a while. We were catching up, talking about life, about old memories, when she suddenly asked me a question that I had been avoiding for weeks. "So, Chris," she said, her eyes searching mine, "what's next for you? Have you thought about what you want to do now?" I hesitated. The truth was, I hadn't really thought about the future, not in any concrete way. The idea of moving on, of letting someone else into my life, seemed so foreign to me. After everything with Jessica, I wasn't sure if I even believed in love anymore. But something about her question made me stop and think. What do I want now? What did I want out of life moving forward? I took a deep breath and finally said what was on my mind. I want to find peace. I want to find a way to live my life without constantly looking over my shoulder, without holding on to the past. I want to be happy again, not for anyone else, but for me. My friend nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's a good start, Chris, and you will get there, one step at a time." It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. It was the kind of hope I needed to hear. I wasn't going to let the pain of the past control my future. I wasn't going to let it define who I was going to become. As the weeks went on, I started to notice small changes within myself. I was able to laugh again, genuinely, without the weight of the world on my shoulders. I found myself doing things I had once loved but had abandoned, taking long walks, reading books, getting lost in movies, doing things that made me feel alive again. I met new people, not with the intention of starting a new relationship, but simply to broaden my horizons, to remind myself that the world wasn't as small as it had felt in the months before. There were so many possibilities out there, so many things I hadn't seen, places I hadn't been, and people I hadn't met. Life was still full of opportunities, and I was determined to seize them, no matter how intimidating it seemed. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, staring out at the city skyline, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about Jessica, about the lies, the betrayal, the broken trust. I thought about how much it had hurt, how much it had changed me. But I also thought about how far I had come, how much I had grown, even through the pain. The journey wasn't over. I knew that. There would still be moments when I would doubt myself, when the memories would flood back, when I would wonder if I would ever truly heal. But I also knew that I wasn't alone. I had friends, I had people who cared about me, and I had myself. I was enough. I always had been. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I was going to be okay. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready for it. I was ready to start a new chapter. I wasn't sure if I would ever trust the same way again. I wasn't sure if I would ever love with the same intensity. But I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to let Jessica's betrayal define the rest of my life. I was going to learn from it, grow from it, and move forward with my head held high. Because the truth was, I had already survived the worst of it. And now, I was ready for whatever came next.